Hello and welcome to the Entrepreneur Society's Winter Speaker Series. My name is Drew Ferrari, and with me today I have Dr. Michael Witt. And with this Winter Speaker Series, what we are trying to accomplish is spotlight university professors and community stakeholders so we can learn more about them and share in their wisdom. Now, Dr. Peter Bush is a respected faculty member here at the University of Michigan-Flint, and he's been with the university since 2003. He has an absolute amazing ability to connect with students, and I can tell you that firsthand because if you go to ratemyprofessor.com, his rating is through the roof. Check that out last night. Welcome, Dr. Bush. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for that introduction.
How much did you make from your GameStop stocks in this recent bubble?
Good, excellent question in that regard. It was an interesting experiment in the classroom because I didn't personally trade it, but since I was actively involved with multiple finance classes at the time, what I was doing as I was going into each classroom is faux trading it, right? So coming up with a plan and a strategy with the class, creating an offline trade with it, and then seeing how it performed over the next couple of days, revising that trade and moving forward. So it really was a very interesting experiment and a good learning opportunity because it really is one of the first times that we've seen a change in the market where we had what I call average citizens, people really driving the market counter to institutional money. And you don't see it often in markets. So it was very interesting. I think it's the beginning of others to come. It's just a matter of how that proceeds forward. I mean, there's some interesting angles on all sides with that, from the Reddit side, from the GameStop side, from Robinhood, and issues that were going on there. So to be honest, we could probably talk about that for about an hour by itself.
Well, if I can ask you, actually, how did you integrate that with your classroom environment? Many of the folks that go to the University of Michigan-Flint are future entrepreneurs in some way, shape, or form, whether that is through contract service or maybe even just on Uber in a way, you could say that. How did you integrate that with those students to learn?
Well, I think it stepped off of some of the discussions we've had in prior classes about the state of markets, equity markets, the sense that there has been a new era of algorithmic trading for quite some time. And so I do research as well in behavioral finance. So my interest is in how people influence markets with the backdrop of the efficient market hypothesis. It's been my view for a number of years that opportunities to earn greater than market returns in the market are reducing with computerized trading and computerized trading systems. Because the average investors can't react nearly as fast as a computer system can. This was an exception, right? It really is kind of a shift in a different direction where you had a group of individuals working together in one way, shape, or form to drive markets counter to these computerized trading systems. And from my perspective, that's rather interesting. What it turns into in the future in terms of legs and such, I'm not sure. But most certainly it was something that we haven't seen. And it is something that could change and maybe rebalance the scales a bit. Because certainly, we talk about, the computerized systems and AI and all of that, it's become very technical. And this was what I call a very non-technical pushback in the direction.
Says the guy with multiple degrees and been in the academic setting for a long time. And that's brings up an important point. We didn't talk really in detail about your resume, and that's something that I think that we want to discuss. And usually our first question is, where did you come from? But talk to us a little bit about your education and your experience as a student.
That's an excellent question, particularly for me here, because I started way back at UM-Flint. So my is at UM-Flint. I'm a former finance major back in the day here. As a matter of fact, one of our faculty, Dr. Syed Madian, I had him as a professor way back in the day. He is my mentor. He is the one who brought me here as a professor back in 2003.
Yeah.
I have a nothing but great things to say about Syed and the influence he's had on me. So really, that's where my journey started. And not only do I thank Syed for getting me into something that I never thought I wanted to do, because I really had absolutely no interest in teaching, had never thought about it at all. And then talking to Syed a couple of years after I graduated, he provided me an opportunity to come here and try a class, and I was hooked, right? And so I owe him that. So I owe him my interest in finance to begin with, because I was an undeclared major originally at UM-Flint. So he is the one who interested me in finance. So I have nothing but great things to say about him.
So now, before you talked about GameStop, but you haven't mentioned that you also have a master's degree in computer information systems. And I actually am currently an undergraduate in computer information systems. And I'd like to know further, how has that degree shaped your career in terms of nowadays everything is automated? Coming from a financial risk management perspective, what are some of the things that degree has allowed you to incorporate in your career?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, so this was graduated in 97 with my
90s. Okay.
Yes. So I graduated in 97 and entered, the finance profession. And it was really at that time where we were starting to migrate more toward computerized systems and accounting systems and all of that, away from what was still, in many respects, paper or something just beyond that. So when I entered the market, I was trying to look for, I guess, a leg up, right? Kind of where's the market going as a professional? Where do I attain an advantage? And my perspective at the time was that with the advent of CIS systems and all of that coming down the pike, the more I knew about systems, the better. And so really that's the reason I went down that path. I would liken it now. So I think it's a little bit of a different environment today.
Well, that's interesting because many folks are thinking that same way, because within the next 10 years, we'll be much more things will be automated, right?
Yeah, no, but I think it's a little bit of a different game today, right? If I were an undergrad BBA finance major coming out now, I'm not sure I would go for a CIS degree next as a master, but I would probably, not that there's anything wrong with it.
Throw me under the bus, okay.
No, but I'm slightly different, and in the same area, I would look at data analytics, right? And which is partial finance, partial CIS to begin with, but really that's where the future goes here, right? And everything's about data, everything's about big data now. The more adept you are at pulling information to be able to do analysis and drive valuation, the more adept you are in the market as a finance professional. So that's where I see the current environment.
So
I'm
Peter,
going to grill you a little bit further, but I'm going to let Dr. Witt speak because I feel like I'm taking all your time. Sorry.
Thank you, Drew. That's nice of you.
I'm excited to talk to him. He's got so much
To follow
knowledge.
on your two nerdy comments, I want you both to know that I was the first person to have a computer at my law firm. Yes, I'm old. But
I had this discussion, Michael, with my finance students the other day, and I disclosed to them that I was one of the first people in my high school to have a computer back in the day. I had an Apple IIc back in 1985, right? And I was a freshman in high school, I guess, at the time. And so I was one of those computer nerds.
Oh, we're talking about Wangs. This was anyway. So what courses would you recommend a student take? Both of you guys know CIS well, and so you're critiquing it. But think of an undergraduate student who needs to have skills in this area. What courses should they take before they leave the university, regardless of whether CIS is going away, as you two predict? So what courses should they take?
That's an excellent question. I don't want to focus on the course numbers, but rather the kind of the general skill sets that are required. And I'll start with kind of the basic level of IT, where, if you are a business undergrad, and particularly if you're a finance or accounting undergrad, knowing Excel inside and out is extremely important still, right? And you can look at it as an older technology, and it is, but it's still a very powerful tool, So knowing Excel, knowing databases and access is extremely important because it's really hard to function in the professional environment without those.
You just said database. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, databases. Yes.
Database. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you said access as well, right?
Yeah.
Microsoft Access. Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I heard that right.
Yeah. No. Back when I started in finance long ago, a lot of what I was doing was developing Excel spreadsheets and such that had automatic, extracts from different databases across, across the corporation I was working for.
Yeah.
I like daily reports and things for the leadership. And really, I mean, that was a long time ago, but still a pertinent skill to have.
So Excel competence is a requirement. What else?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think data analytics, I think the ability, even if you are not per se a techie, right, the ability to understand the complexities of systems. We talked about computerized trading networks, things like machine language. We want to talk about, the future of AI and what it'll bring both from the trading perspective, but also from the analytical and valuation perspective. So I really think having a working knowledge and understanding of how these systems work, how they're developed, not that you're necessarily going to be developing them if you're not an IT person, but you're going to be working with them. And one of the things that I focus on with finance students is not just creating a number, but at the end of the day, what does that number mean? What does that data mean? How do we use it? And how do we just drive decision making, right? And I think that's, the future is probably less hands-on, computational work for finance professionals, but more synthesizing and using data coming out of systems to be able to drive appropriate business decisions. I think that's where the future lies.
Well, many students work, and you have a lot of relationships in the tier one auto supply industry. How is that industry going? How can students position themselves to be good employees for those employers?
Yeah, I would say the industry has taken a little bit of a turn over the past probably 3 to 4 years, where I would say that back 3-4 years ago, actually when I left that industry, we were still largely what I call old school, right? In the sense that we were still looking at the same technology basis, the same futures of technology. And I'm not talking about CIS and finance technology. I'm talking about drivetrain technology and the technologies that are actually used in the auto space. Since that time, there's been a big shift, away toward alternative types of vehicles, whether it's electric or hybrids or other types of things. So a lot of these tier ones have made major shifts and major investments to move in that direction. So certainly, once again, having the ability to be able to work with systems, to work with IT people, to work with others is extremely important. I mean, that's first thing. Outside of that, collaboration is critical. Basically in all the classes that we do here and elsewhere, and especially in my courses, I focus on group work and things of that nature, which of course brings a lot of grunting and groaning from students at times. But there's a reason for it, right? And at the end of the day, groups don't always function like a well-oiled machine, right? Things happen. There are disputes. There are different challenges that come up in that environment, but that is the real world. In my 20 years in the auto industry, I was probably actively involved in dozens of groups at the same time at all times, right? So it really is kind of juggling the complexity of being able to deal with all these different challenges, the global environment, the group environment, and the technology-based changing at the same time, because it is a rapidly evolving industry at this point.
Well, there's
Absolutely.
a lot of use of Zoom technology and Microsoft Teams. The number of meetings that we're called upon to attend has exploded. And there's a lot of discussion historically about how we should minimize the amount of time we spend in meetings because it's less productive. And now we're at 10x that level. So the pandemic has messed with all of us and improved some of our communication systems. Where do you see this headed in the next 12 months? Hoping we can get back to regular meetings soon, right?
Sure. If I knew the answer to that, I probably wouldn't, be sitting here. I'd probably be someplace on my yacht. But no, there's a couple points. The first is that I am an anti-meeting guy to begin with. Being a finance guy, I don't think meetings are generally useful. So if you go into a meeting, there should be a clear objective coming out of that meeting, or else there's no need for one, right? That's my perspective. Now, that being said, right, the pandemic changed a great deal on many fronts, right? And the meeting one is part of that structural shift that we saw. And the interesting thing, going back to where we started this discussion with the tier 1 auto industry and really the auto industry in general, I mentioned them being kind of old school and stodgy. They always have been, right? I mean, to be able to not be in the office, to work remotely, or things of that nature were considered future tech, right? There was just no acceptance of that type of change in the way we do business. And all of a sudden, March 2020 happened, right? And suddenly everybody is remote and everybody is meeting like this. And what I think we found, at least for the most part, is that we can function pretty well like this, right? And so when I think about it as a former finance leader, one of the questions I'd be asking myself is, how do we justify all this office space that we're renting? Because that's a large SG&A expense that we're absorbing, when we found in 2020, probably, that we were just as effective working in this environment. So it'll be interesting to see how that shift occurs and whether that actually occurs. There's plenty of still that old school stodginess that exists in that industry. But that being said, I think there's going to be a push and a demand, from the employee base, saying that, what, we can effectively like this. Why should I go sit in traffic for an hour to get back to the office? That'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
What do you like best about UM-Flint?
I like the diversity of the student base. I mean, it's really, when you sit in one of our classrooms or, in an online environment, we have a pretty broad base of students that are in our courses. And, from obviously, plenty of domestic students, but plenty from other places, from the Middle East, from Asia, et cetera. And I really like that because they bring different perspectives into the classroom. They ask questions that you might not get at times if you were dealing with a more synergistic base. So it's really quite nice. So that's one of the things I really like about the university, is that we do draw a rather diverse crowd.
Many of our students work, mine on average 30 hours per week while attending full-time classes. What advice do you have for them?
Well, I did that. So, it was, I never stopped working. I was working full-time while I did my undergrad, while I did all my grad work, et cetera. It takes tenacity to get through it. And there were times, especially in my undergrad, where honestly, I was broke. I had no money. I was hungry and I was tired, and it was making me angry. And I thought about stepping away for a semester or stepping away for a year and just kind of resetting myself from the financial perspective. And I wouldn't let myself do it, right? Whenever I got to that point, I would step back and say, why are you here to begin with? What is goal number one, priority number one? And it was always get your degree, right? So then I would, so I'd go through a little bit of time of struggle, but I would reset myself. And I think it's important to reset yourself and to keep your priorities in line and keep your focus where it needs to be. And, even when you're exhausted, even when you're sleeping 2 hours a night, even when you're doing all these things, I believe it takes a great deal of tenacity. A second thing I would say is take advantage of your classmates, your friends, others, your support group. Because at the end of the day, we talked about the world, the professional environment being all about teams and groups and all of that. I don't view the academic experience any differently. I mean, you should have a work group of friends that you're going through the program with, where you're studying together, supporting each other, taking notes together, going through assignments together. I mean, I think that's important. And at times, I think we fall back on thinking it's supposed to be an individual experience, and it really shouldn't be. And if you do that, and you all support each other, it makes the experience much better, but also much more palatable.
I've I try to encourage my students to think strategically about their job selections so that they build on their careers. If they're working at a job that will advance their learning and complement their coursework, I try to get them to take those valuable hours where they're spent working and try to build them to leverage their academics.
Yeah, I think the entire process, the entire journey should be strategic, and that's not just the academic skill. But when you're in academia, strategically working your way through the program, attaining proper skill sets. Once again, collaborating, meeting people. Connections mean a lot. But even once you get into the professional environment, once I started building my resume there, once I started in the auto industry early on, actually it was banking first, but the auto industry shortly thereafter. Every move that I made from the employment perspective was strategic, right? I did not just accept jobs for random reasons. I would look at what I needed to do to build my skill set next, and I would look for jobs that helped me build that skill set, right? And I would pursue those jobs rather than just taking the next promotion up, right? Because then you start to get slotted somewhere, and that's not what you want, right? You want a broad skill set. And I think it's important to be very strategic about what you do as you move forward.
So that's something that I saw within your resume, your LinkedIn page. It was like you're a machine. I was wondering, do you sleep? Do you do social things? But I did notice that, often you've made a lot of moves over the years that it's not lateral, where a lot of students or, folks that are in the marketplace now, I feel like often make those moves, whereas that's not something I've seen from you. That was something that is continually going up. And then at the end there, I noticed that of all the time that you spent as a student, you came back to a university.
Yeah.
That tells me that you seem to have a love for teaching. I guess what I want to know is, from when did you figure out in all those moves that going back to the university was where it was at for you? Was there an aha moment?
Yeah, well, to a degree, right? And as I mentioned, back when I was an undergrad, et cetera, I never, ever thought about teaching. It was something that was just foreign to me. As a matter of fact, going through high school and such, I was one of those people that was petrified to step in front of a room.
Yeah.
If you called me up there, I just said, you dragged me up there with a hook. I'm not going up there, right? So, I mean, it's a career path that I would have never, ever considered. So I mentioned, in 2003, the opportunity came up for me to teach my very first class at UM-Flint. And so essentially, it was kind of a last minute thing. I had about 2 weeks before the class started where I found out about it. So it was quite the fire drill, creating my own syllabus for the first time, all that type of stuff. I could tell you the very first night of class, which was a Tuesday night, walking down the hallway to that classroom, I was hoping that somehow a bolt of lightning would come to the ceiling and just drop me dead in the hall. I was so petrified to walk into the classroom the first night. Because you're up there, it's your syllabus, you're kind of wide open fodder in front of the room. And so I was absolutely petrified. It didn't take that long. It took maybe a semester or two for me to get comfortable in front of the room. And it goes back to something else you alluded to, which was my drive, meaning that I did not want to ever walk into a room again and feel exposed. So I made sure that I knew my material and I knew how to handle questions, and I was not going to get rolled under a bus for all practical purposes. So it wasn't long after that, maybe within a year or two, that I realized that I think I had stumbled across my calling entirely accidentally. And it was probably maybe 2 years later that I decided to pursue my doctorate with a plan longer term to exit corporate at some point. And that was always an open variable to me, which is when. I didn't know when. There wasn't like a specific time. It wasn't 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. It was just when the opportunity came and it felt right.
So let me just ask you about that. What you're describing to me sounds exactly like the path to entrepreneurship for many people. And would you consider yourself an entrepreneur?
In a couple of different ways. So I guess specifically, so after I left corporate, after I started full-time in education, we ended up moving. I was living in Metro Detroit for a long period of time. The opportunity came where I didn't have to be anywhere all that often, meaning, you know, I'm in the building like 2 days a week here. I could move someplace that I wanted to live. So we ended up moving to Houghton Lake and buying a house on the lake. So I shifted, I guess I shifted myself in a direction where I was having a more broad-based experience. So in that time frame, myself and two partners bought a retail business in Houghton Lake, which is a retail pet shop. So we've owned that.
That was going to be my next question, is if you had done anything outside of teaching as far as your own business.
Yeah, a number of them. I mean, that one we bought 2.5 years ago. We've been, it's been a very successful venture for us. It's been growing.
Perfect. Okay, now I got you. Now I got you. Here we go.
There we go.
Okay, now you opened up for me. I was waiting that whole time. Here we go. You ready?
Yes.
All right. So, as I'm sure you're aware, the Hagerman Center is doing a lot of stuff for entrepreneurs to get their ideas out there, right?
Yeah.
And you see things come through the events pages for the university for pitches. Now that I've got you, you got 1 minute to give us your pet shop pitch, okay? And I'm going to clock you. I got the cell phone here. Tell us about your company and, well, do a standard pitch. Give us the elevator pitch for it. Are you ready?
Ready as I'm going to be.
All right, here we go. You ready? I'm not going to show you the times. You just got to know. All right, here we go.
Okay. So our pet shop venture in Houghton Lake, it's an old school pet shop. It is, we sell and do most everything. So from aquatics to reptiles to small animals to animal foods to training and all kinds of other activities. So you can think of us sort of as a PetSmart Small. Strategically, from my perspective, we purchased the business because there is not a lot of competition around us. It's actually quite a distance to other pet shops, so we have a little bit of a strategic play in terms of the products we sell. We sell a lot of upper tier dog food. So if you're looking for quality foods for your pets that are not the generic
Coming up.
stuff, we've got that. Was that a minute?
Right there. Yeah. Well done. That's great. Now, I want to ask you, so being a business owner, right? And it sounds like you put many months in planning into this before you started, or, you know, I'm sure you've got knowledge. It's a lot easier for you than most folks, right? Mm-hmm. However, what advice would you give to future business owners or University of Michigan-Flint potential business owners that maybe that they should know before they get started?
How long do you have? Yeah, I talk about
keep it quick.
I talk about this in my finance classes all the time. I mean, first of all, with the pandemic and what we've been through in 2020 and where we are right now, it is an extremely volatile market.
Yeah,
it is a tough. I guess opening any business in this market is a challenge. But let's just put that aside for a minute and say that, okay, we're going to move toward normalcy. So first and foremost, after pandemic, unfortunately there's a heck of a lot of opportunity out there because there are many businesses that have failed. And for the primary purpose that I talk about, which is a lack of liquidity. So one of the first, I guess the first major pieces of advice that I give to people, if they're thinking about opening a business, whatever it may be, is to sit down and put together a cash projection for the first year. And I know that can be difficult, but there are places where you can extract information, you can collaborate with other people. But what I tell people is come up with a list of all the things that you think are going to cost you in terms of cash in year one, and then double it. Start from there, right? Because that's the reality, is that if you look at how most businesses fail, when they do fail, and most do, unfortunately, it is due to a lack of liquidity. Right, it is a liquidity bankruptcy that occurs for most businesses, and unfortunately, it happens relatively quickly for many. There was actually a pizza shop that opened up in Houghton Lake last year. Actually, no, it was a year and a half ago now. They made it 2 months, literally 2 months.
Wow, pizza? That's the best. I mean, how's it go out of business? It's a winner.
they ran out of cash. It was pretty
Yeah.
evident, right? They started sending out messages through Facebook and such about a month into their existence that they were only going to do pizza on like Friday and Saturday or something like that. Like, well, you're a pizza place, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So people kind of immediately moved away from using the product, and that was it, right? It was a death spiral. So first and foremost is you are never going to have enough cash, and that is in pandemic environments. When the pandemic hits, that is a whole other world. Right? from from the finance perspective, first and foremost, it's all about cash.
All right,
Perfect.
our last question, sir,
All right.
is what, you're hiding up there in Houghton Lake, taking care of puppies, having a great time. What do you do in your free time?
Well, I prefer the summer. Let's start there. I'm not a big ice fisherman guy, so I'm not going to be in an ice shack anytime soon. But I love living on the lake because I love the summer. I love the water. It's like being on vacation from May to almost October every year. I mean, I wake up in the morning and I'm at the beach, which is, the water is 50 feet off my back door. And so I enjoy being outdoors. I enjoy being on my boats and my jet skis. I enjoy sitting on my deck and working and doing Zoom meetings and grading papers and all of that. There is no better place that I know of to do it. So that's what I like. I really love being on a lake. I love the water and I love the outdoors.
Well, that's an idyllic life. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dr. Bush.
Anytime, my pleasure.
Thank you.